English 111 will explore literature from the earliest writings to the current period in three genres: fiction, poetry, and drama. This week we'll be beginning with fiction. People have been telling stories throughout recorded history. From the earliest myths to contemporary TV, stories are a way that we explore and define our world. We use them to answer questions, make arguments, and express our beliefs and desires. We're going to be skipping over myths and epics in this course, though if you're interested in that, you can take World Literature 271, and jump straight to the development of short stories in America. In the earliest days of America, after the colonization by the Europeans, the literature was shaped by the heritage of the immigrants who brought their traditions with them. But as America began to define itself, its stories began to be shaped by its new place in the world. The era of the Revolution, called the Age of Enlightenment, was marked by didactic literature meant to teach and explore the world in a logical, realistic way. The era after that, where we'll be starting, developed a literary movement known as Romanticism. When reading literature, scholars divide the text into groups known as literary movements based on the time period and the characteristics of the writing. These periods are marked by shared characteristics in the art and literature that was produced during that time, and they reflect the time period and society in which they were written. In the early 19th century, Romanticism developed as a direct reaction to the rationality of the Enlightenment. Romanticism was marked by emotion, imagination, and a focus on individual sentiment. It tended to idealize the world. Or, in the case of Gothic Romanticism, which centered on the supernatural, lost damsels, doomed love, and the grand and gloomy settings, think Frankenstein or Jekyll and Hyde, it offered a fantastical version of it. The story that we'll be reading from this era is The Cask of Amontillado by Edgar Allan Poe. While probably best known for his poetry, Poe was also a critic and short story writer who helped to shape the genres of horror and science fiction. He is also considered the father of the modern detective story. Poe's own life was marked by tragedy at an early age. He was born in 1809 in Boston, Massachusetts, the son of actors Elizabeth and David Poe. His parents died when he was 3, and his adolescence was marred by gambling debts that led to an estrangement from his foster family and an expulsion from West Point Military Academy. After that, Poe moved to Baltimore to live with his cousin and his aunt. His cousin, Virginia Clem, would later become his wife at the age of 13. He was 27. In 1845, he published The Raven and Other Poems, which became wildly successful. However, 2 years later, Virginia died. At this time, accounts began to spread of Poe's erratic behavior. There are conflicting accounts surrounding the last days of Edgar Allan Poe and the cause of his death. Some say he died from alcoholism, some claimed he was murdered. Various diseases, including rabies, have also been suggested. Most agree that he was found unconscious in the street, admitted to the Washington College in Baltimore, Maryland. He died soon after, on the 7th of October in 1849, and was buried in an unmarked grave in the Old Westminster Burying Ground of Baltimore. In his poems and stories, including The Cask of Amontillado, he focused on exploring the darker side of literature and the human psyche. In this, he exemplifies the idea of Gothic Romanticism with its focus on the dark and dreadful horrors of the world. Romanticism was prominent during the early 1800s in America, but as the Civil War approached, the mood of the country changed, and with it, the literature that was being produced. Literature became didactic, focused on teaching, and even propagandistic. After the war, the country lost any sense of idealism. Every person had in some way been affected. Many had lost friends and family members, or had even fought in the war themselves. Writers like Walt Whitman and Emily Dickinson explored these dark times and emotions through their writing, using new forms and exploring themes like death and mortality. As they did so, they began to find a voice that was uniquely American. As the country came to grips with the many changes in the aftermath of the war, the literary style became focused on depicting the world as it was. This was the beginning of the American realist movement. Realism strove to depict life objectively, trying to accurately portray settings, dialects, and situations. Realists like Mark Twain rejected the idealized situations, exotic settings, and improbable plot twists presented in romantic literature. The realist goal was at all times to present the truth of what they saw and experienced. Kate Chopin, the author of The Story of an Hour, was born in 1851 in St. Louis. Her early writings were very much in the realist mode, focusing on depicting the life that she observed in the South. These works are often categorized as local color, a style of writing that relied on natural dialects and specific regional detail to bring to life the world as it actually existed. As she continued her writing career, Chopin's work began to focus specifically on the experiences of women. In 1899, Chopin published her most famous piece, The Awakening, a realistic novel about the sexual and artistic awakening of a young wife and mother who abandons her family. This text was broadly condemned at the time because of its openness about sexuality and its portrayal of an interracial marriage. It was not printed again until the 1950s, when Chopin became recognized as an important American writer. As realism became the dominant literary movement in America, a subgenre known as psychological realism began to develop. Writers like Charlotte Perkins Gilman embraced the goals of realism in their writings, striving at all times for authenticity and truth. However, where realists like Chopin tried to explore the world around them and the individual's place within it, psychological realists took these same principles and applied them to the internal reality of life. These writers focused on the thought processes and accurate characterizations of the people that they brought to life. The works of psychological realism focus largely on the inner lives of the people and can sometimes be intentionally vague, depicting characters with imperfect self-knowledge and unfulfilled yearnings. Writer and social activist Charlotte Perkins Gilman was born in 1860 in Hartford, Connecticut. Gilman had a difficult childhood. Her father abandoned the family, leaving Charlotte's mother to raise 2 children on her own. In 1884, Gilman married artist Charles Stetson. During her decade-long marriage to Stetson, Gilman experienced severe postpartum depression and underwent a series of psychological treatments for it, including the so-called rest cure, prescribed by noted psychologist Silas Ware Mitchell. The theory behind this treatment was that women suffered from hysteria and should be kept away from all stimulation. Gilman found this treatment extremely harmful to her mental health. Her concerns and objectives were dismissed. She eventually sought a divorce from her husband, something that was scandalous at the time. This experience is believed to have inspired her story, The Yellow Wallpaper. As realism and its cousin psychological realism became the dominant movements in literature, some writers began feeling a limitation in its approach of depicting the world objectively. They began to explore literature's ability to not just report about the world, but to investigate it, and with that, they began to develop naturalism. Naturalists wanted to find and identify the underlying causes for the way people and societies acted and what they believed. Drawing on the works of Charles Darwin, they explored how heredity, social status, and environment impacted people's lives. They came to the conclusion that these forces were inescapable, that we have little power to improve or affect our lot in life. This pessimistic view dismissed almost entirely the idea of free will and benevolence in the universe. Nature and the environment became almost characters in and of themselves in this naturalistic writing, shaping the lives of people in ways beyond their control and often beyond their understanding. Like the realists, and especially the psychological realists, plot was very much secondary to depicting characters. Naturalists placed their characters in dire situations, exploring the ways that their birth, nature, and environment limited their response. If realists were the journalists of literature, naturalists were the scientists, using literature as a laboratory to explore the limits of mankind. Despite their interest in social ills, however, the naturalists did not argue for a change. They simply took the world as it was and sought to understand it. One of the first truly naturalist novels in American literature was Stephen Crang's Maggie, a Girl of the Streets, which depicted life in the slums of New York. The novel was so gritty and bleak that Crane could not find a publisher and instead had to publish it on his own. Stephen Crane was born in 1871, the son of a Methodist preacher and a reform worker. He was raised with a faith in a benevolent God, the idea of man's importance, and a belief in free will. All ideas he would later satirize in his writings. He originally planned to be a soldier, then studied to be an engineer before moving to New York, where he became a journalist and studied the life of the hardest parts of the city. Most famous for the Red Badge of Courage, the story of a Civil War soldier is dark and satiric, focusing on realistic battles and the internal turmoil of the protagonist. Our story this week, Open Boat, was written after Crane took part in an unsuccessful gun-running mission in Cuba. He moved to England shortly after that before succumbing to tuberculosis at the age of 28. One important element to consider whenever you read is the author's choices about narration and point of view. The narrator is the primary speaker or voice in a fictional or poetic piece. This is not necessarily the author's own voice or point of view. Many adopt a persona, that is a character who tells the story and shapes the perspectives of the readers. The narration is also affected by the point of view that the author uses. A first-person narrator tells the story from their own point of view. They only tell you what they personally see and know. This type of narrator may be unreliable, either because he or she lacks knowledge and does not accurately represent the situation, or because the narrator is untrustworthy. Keep your eye on the narrators for this week. Stories can also be told from a second-person perspective, though this is rare outside of choose-your-own-adventure books, or in the third person. Third person can either be a close third, as if we're watching over the shoulder of one specific person, or an omniscient third, as if an all-knowing deity is telling us the story. All of the stories for this week are a reflection of the lives of the people who wrote them. But, more broadly, they're also a reflection of the time and place in which these authors were living. As you read this week, ask yourself, what are these stories saying about the world in which they were created? Don't forget, you have a discussion board post this week. We'll be focusing on narrators and point of view. And as always, your journal entry about one of the texts that we've read. If you have any questions or concerns, just let me know, and happy reading.